Okay, welcome to Shakespeare. I hope you guys had a good summer and that you got a lot of rest because you're going to need brain power for this course. So, um, could someone please shut the back door for me? Thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned, I take the bus from Taipei and it's often late. So this class will begin whenever I get here. Unless we're watching a movie. If we're watching a movie, I will not be late. Okay, so um, this class will be a discussion-based literature course. Some of you have taken literature courses with me before. You know how this works. Everything you need to know, it will be on Moodle, brand new Moodle format that everybody has to learn how to deal with now. So let's take a look at what we're doing this semester. Um, the syllabus here. Okay, time and place. You know the time, you know the place. Otherwise, you're not here. The textbook. I have prepared a complete course packet PDF that I have uploaded to Moodle. And it is basically taken from this edition of Shakespeare. Shakespeare, of course, is not a new author. There are many different versions on the market, but none of them are exactly the same. The thing about Shakespeare is, in his time, people did not publish what they wrote, especially because Shakespeare mainly wrote plays. They were performed. The reason we have Shakespeare's plays, first of all, is because during his lifetime, some people thought that they were so great, I have to write them down. And often these came from people in the audience, other actors, not Shakespeare himself. And often these versions were recreated from memory. Now you might be thinking, that's amazing. How do you remember a Shakespeare play after seeing it once or twice? And the answer is because they didn't have cell phones, their memory still worked. But also because it was their language, it was their everyday language, it was easier for them to remember. And also because Shakespeare wrote most of his plays and wrote his plays in most part in poetry. And poetry is easier to remember. There are rules about how to write a line of English poetry. The second reason we have Shakespeare's plays today is because after he died, again, people thought, wow, he was such a great writer. We have to make sure his plays and works are remembered. So again, after he died, he's no longer there to help. His co-workers, his friends, again, put together what they had and recreated his plays. So any modern editor has to deal with questions of, what if I have one play remembered by two different groups of people and there are major differences? Which version of each line should I choose? And also, what if in these remembered versions, there are parts that don't make sense? Maybe somebody wrote something wrong. Maybe somebody remembered something wrong. Maybe the printer got something wrong because this was the early days of printing and printing was not as reliable. So each edition has an editor who makes these choices all over again. So if you go to like Amazon or like Bokalai and you look for example, Macbeth, a very famous Shakespeare play that we will read this semester, you will find many different editions. And none of them are exactly the same because each editor has made different choices. for this class, we are using this version. And look, I'm giving it to you for free, right? But if for some reason you use a different version when you take the exam and the text is significantly different from what we read in class, then you're not going to get those points. Okay, so the course packet I have prepared for you looks like this. There is a very carefully designed title page. There's the syllabus. There is a brief timeline of major historical events during Shakespeare's lifetime. Shakespeare himself is an important historical figure, so major historical events include events related to Shakespeare. And then we have excerpts from the textbook. We will be doing 4 units, the sonnets, and then 3 plays. Each unit has an introduction and then the text. Now, the introduction, I will not be talking about in class. That is there if you want to read more. So I have also prepared a paper handout, which most of you now have in your hands. As it says on Moodle, an abridged paper handout is available on request. Abridged means I have cut some things in order to make sure I don't kill too many trees. And the things that I have cut are the title page and the introductions. So in the handout you have in your hands now, you only have the syllabus and okay, this handout is for the midterm exam. So you have 2 units. You have the sonnets and you have 1 play. And then later in the semester, as we get into the last 2 plays, I will ask you if you want another paper handout. And if you want one, I will give one to you. Grading policy, 40% midterm, 60% final. So, you should work hard on the midterm exam and the final exam. They're very important. Office hours, you can check my public schedule. It's on the information system. Course description, this course will be taught in English, as you can tell. We'll be doing 10 sonnets and then 3 plays. The Taming of the Shrew, Much Ado About Nothing. These 2 are some of his early plays. And then Macbeth, which is a late play. You must do the assigned readings before class. And the following 2 sentences explain why. The first week will be a lecture. That is this week. I am lecturing. This is a lecture. After that, each week will feature group discussions of open-ended questions, followed by a lecture. So look, we're going to begin with discussions. We are going to discuss what you should read, what you should have read before coming to class. If you did not read it, it will be hard to discuss. Therefore, you must do the assigned readings before class. Now, because Shakespeare is not exactly easy to read, he's quite fun to read, but you have to work for it. Each unit will begin with a film. Now, I do have to remind you that the film will always be at least a little bit different from the play. The most obvious reason is because the play will be much longer than the film. And due to our time constraints, I had to choose a film within 110 minutes. So there will always be some differences. But also because I may not choose a film that is actually the play. I may choose a film that is based on the play. So it will be even more different. Maybe it will be set in the present day. Maybe it will have different characters, but the basic story will be very similar to the play. So again, when you're taking the exams, don't rely on the film, because if the detail that you use from the film is different from the play, again, you will not get those points. And then finally, the exams will be open book, take home online essay questions in English. And I will talk more about that later. Schedule. Week 1, introduction. I'm doing that now. Then we're going to spend 2 weeks on the sonnets. We're going to read 5 each week. That should be like the next page in the handout, and then the page after that in the handout. Something like that. Then week 4, we're going to watch a movie. Week 5 to 7, we're doing The Taming of the Shrew. I have divided each week so that the number of pages you have to read is about the same. And then week 7, I will also introduce the midterm exam. And the midterm exam, again, it is a take-home online exam. So it will begin after class on week 7, and it will end before midnight, week 8. I'll give you the detailed dates. It's on Moodle. I'll show you later. So week 8, you are still taking the exam. It is still within the exam time period. So we're going to watch the movie for the next play. Then we're spending 3 weeks reading that. Then we're going to watch the movie of the last play. Spend 3 weeks on that. Christmas is a holiday. What a miracle. And then, so week 15 after class, I will introduce the final exam, and you will have 1 week to do that. 17, 18 is self-study. Don't worry about that. Okay, questions so far? Alrighty, let's keep looking at the Moodle page. So that was the syllabus. Course plan is that official thing on the student information website that nobody reads. Class emails. I'll try to give you all the important information in class, but if I forget something and it's very important, I will post something here and Moodle will send you an email. Course packet. If you don't need a paper copy, you can just download that. Although studies have shown that you study better if you have a paper copy. You can take notes, you can highlight, you can actually physically flip the pages. So I encourage you to ask for one if you want to, learn and remember better. Another thing that you should consider for this class is to find an English to English dictionary that you enjoy using. Not an English to Chinese dictionary. First of all, because some of the words you'll see are kind of old. And the English to Chinese dictionary may not have it. Or it may have the word, but the meaning may have changed. Or it could have the word, but the meaning is just wrong. Right? Some English to Chinese dictionaries are not very good. But finally, because if you use an English to Chinese dictionary, you're not actually learning the word. You're learning a translation of the word. If you use an English to Chinese dictionary, you might as well just ask AI, right? It's the same thing. So if you do want to learn about the words we are using, I encourage an English to English dictionary. And try to find one that has an explanation of the history of the word, which is called etymology, 自然学. Most good dictionaries will have this section. Even online dictionaries will have this one. For example, if you don't know which dictionary to choose, just go to dictionary.com. It's actually quite a good dictionary. And so one example of a word whose meaning has changed, the word want. Today, it means like we are looking for something, we desire something. In Shakespeare's day, the word want meant lack. You don't have something. Now, you can see how these ideas might be related, how we might move from not having to looking for. But because the meaning is not exactly the same, in Shakespeare's day, if a character says something something wants something, it doesn't mean they're looking for it. It just means they don't have it. So that's just one example. And an English to English dictionary would give you the older meaning also. In fact, let me show you. To be without or be deficient in. To want judgment, to want knowledge, which means to lack judgment, to lack knowledge. That's the meaning that Shakespeare would be using. Another study tip is to take notes while you read. Um, first of all, because the act of writing something will help you remember. Also, choosing what to write will help you remember. And so I encourage you, like after every section, like every scene or every major plot point, just write down the key points next to that part. And the third good reason to take notes while you read is because the exams are open book. You will need to look for evidence to answer the question. If you take notes, you don't have to reread the whole play. You can look at your notes to find which part you should read in more detail. It can save you time. Okay, so that's the course packet. Lecture recordings, I am recording this. Every week I will record the lecture parts of the class. So after the discussion, and then we'll come back, I'll talk, and I'll record me talking. And then I will upload the recording to YouTube. Why? Because the next one teaches you how to open a searchable YouTube transcript. YouTube will automatically generate a transcript of the video, and you can search the transcript. You can Control F and find what you're looking for. And when you find it and you click on it, it will jump to that part in the video. So it's a more efficient way to use lecture recording to find something that you want to review, or maybe you fell asleep and you want to listen to that part again. Okay, the films are also already on Moodle, or there's a link to the films, I should say. So if you want to review the films for some reason, you can download those and watch them at home, even though you shouldn't use them for the exam. But I don't know, maybe you'll find them really fun to watch and you want to watch them again. And so the next link tells you how to add subtitles to a video file. Yeah, don't worry. I'm going to give you Chinese subtitles. So if you want to watch them at home again, you can add subtitles to those files. Okay, so those are the key parts. Then we have this. There we go. Okay, so yeah, this is the AI lecture portion of today. You'll notice that I did not say you cannot use AI, but there are some things you should pay attention to. First of all, we know we cannot trust AI, but do you know how much we cannot trust AI? This is for GPT-4. We are currently on GPT-5, but to my understanding, it has not improved that much. This is the accuracy rate for questions that are asked of GPT-4 divided according to area of expertise. So on the bottom, you have like coding and history, things like that. The bright green are GPT-4. If you look very closely, you will see that the accuracy rate for the best areas are just above 80%, and for the worst areas are just below 70%. Which means, in the best case, every time you ask ChatGPT a question, it will be incorrect 20% of the time. The problem is you don't know which 20%. So if you want to use AI, you can. There are ways to use AI that can help you very much. But if you're asking it for information that you don't know, you must double check. Okay, so these are the things that I hope you learn in a literature course. Literary history, what happened in literature back in those days. The literary canon and values. These are the texts that experts consider to be good and important. And the values are why they think these are important. Literary analysis. How do you read something and make it make sense? How do you use that evidence? Literary appreciation. How can you tell for yourself whether this is a good piece of literature? Problem solving. When you have trouble understanding something, how do you make that make sense? Motivation and resilience. When you get discouraged, how do you keep going instead of giving up? Oral communication. You have group discussions. Synthesis. How do you put together ideas from different people? Critical thinking and position taking. How can you tell if something does make sense or not? If you have a question, somebody gives you an answer. Does that make sense? How can you tell? Argument from textual evidence. When you have an idea, how do you find evidence for that idea in the text? And written expression, that is, of course, the exam. However, I don't spend time on every single one of these. These are the ones that I will spend time on in class. The literary history through the lectures, that would be especially today, later today. The literary canon in terms of what are important Shakespeare plays, you can guarantee that the 3 plays I chose are all important. The literary analysis in our class discussions and in my lectures, we'll be looking closely at specific parts of the text. Oral communication. So like every day you get in, you go to your groups, you talk about a question. I will go around and help you with the discussion. And when I help you, I will sometimes rephrase your answer in a way that I think makes more sense. That is called recasting. And then after every group is finished, I will come back to the front and I will summarize each group's answers. That is also recasting. And so if you pay attention to not only what I say, but also how I say it, it can help improve your oral communication. Critical thinking and position taking. Again, when I recast your answers and I connect it to some parts of the text, that is helping you to see what makes sense and what not. And I'll do the same. Doing that also helps with argument from textual evidence. These are the things that ChatGPT can help you with. Problem solving, yeah, if you have a question, you can ask it, it'll help you. So if you add these two together, these are the things that you can get from me or AI. These are the things that if you put us together, we can help you with. And therefore, these two, you have to learn by yourself. What makes a text a good text? What is interesting, entertaining, important to you? Nobody can decide that for you. And when you feel like you want to give up, how do you not give up? I guess ChatGPT can help you with that, right? You can say, I want to give up, and it'll say, oh, it looks like you're dealing with something hard. Maybe here are some things that'll help. I don't know. But Please don't email me at 3 a.m. and ask me to cheer you up. I'm not going to do that. Okay, that's the end of this PowerPoint. Do you have questions about AI use? Okay, let's take a short break, and then we'll go into detail about what we're doing in the class and for the exams. Okay, so there are a couple other items on the Moodle page that might be of interest to you. Maybe you're thinking, I came to study applied English. I want to learn how to use English better. I want to be a good business person. Why am I studying Shakespeare or any kind of literature? So here's a paper written in Chinese that kind of explains some of the usual reasons people have for why it's a good idea to study literature. But there's one idea that this paper does not mention, which is that literature can prepare you for the future. Yes. You guys are, I'm going to assume none of you are older than 25. So you still have like 2/3 of your life ahead of you. If you don't read literature, if you focus on your own life, you live one life. If you do read literature and listen to people's stories and their experiences, then you get to lead many, many more lives than just your own. Especially for someone like Shakespeare, who really got at the heart of many different kinds of human experience. You're probably not going to kill your boss. You're hopefully not going to be tempted to cheat on your partner. But Shakespeare shows you that experience, what that could be like, why that could be a bad idea. And he does so in a way that really uses the English language to express many different perspectives, possibilities, and intensities. So that's another benefit of reading literature. It can help you prepare for the future so that when things happen in your life, you're not completely taken by surprise. You will have remembered from taking Shakespeare that something like this might happen, and how maybe to deal with it or how not to deal with it. And then another reason that people often mention is literature can help foster empathy, right? If you understand people better, you will care about them more and you will become a better human being. This is not always true. Yes, literature can help you understand people better, but that does not always make you a better person. Understanding people is a kind of knowledge. Knowledge is a tool. You can use tools in many different ways. You can use your understanding of people to make them laugh, make them like you. You can use your understanding of people to hurt people. So yes, literature will help you learn about humans, but what you do with that knowledge is still your own choice. Okay, and then the last item here is it's a collection of like English learning tips that I have written over the past couple of years, and I have posted on our department's Facebook page anonymously. And I have put together the important ones here in this Chinese language document for your reference. Okay, just another reminder from this YouTuber. If you haven't read it, then you absolutely need to read it before coming to class. Otherwise, none of this will make sense. Okay, so all of the discussion questions are already on Moodle. If you're reading something and you get stuck, you're not sure why you're reading this, you don't know what to pay attention to, you can take a look at my discussion questions because I'm going to ask about parts that I think are interesting or important. And you can use those questions to guide your reading. So if you have not taken one of my courses before, let me show you what an open-ended question looks like. I'm not going to ask you, what is this person's name? What did they do on page 5? I'm going to ask you questions for which different people will have different answers. So we can really talk about why different people have different answers. So for example, these are next week's discussion questions. Okay, let me explain how to read this question. Question 1, do you think the criticisms of Summer in Sonnet 18 are coherent, which means do they make sense? And then the opening parenthesis, why or why not? So not only am I asking you for an answer, I'm also asking you to explain your answer. And the question is also directly related to the text. Number 2, do you think the emphasis in Sonnet 30 is on the sorrow or the friend? And why do you think this? Question 3, do you think the speaker of Sonnet 35 is really blaming themselves? Why or why not? Question 4, how do you think the form, the way that it looks, of lines 5 to 8 in Sonnet 60 help to make the poem's point? So first you have to think about what is the point of the poem. Then you have to look at those 4 lines, look at how they are written, see if there's some way that they help to make that point, and then explain your thinking. Why? Finally, question 5, who do you think Sonnet 62 is addressing? Why? Who is it talking to? So for these poems, there will be a speaker, and sometimes there will be an addressee. The speaker is the person in the poem who says I, and the addressee is the person that the speaker is talking to. It is not always true that the speaker is Shakespeare, the poet. In fact, this is a major debate among Shakespeare scholars. I'll introduce that a bit later when I introduce the next unit for next week. But yeah, so you can see these are the kinds of questions that I will ask. Okay, exams. There are a lot of exam rules, and I'll talk about these in more detail when I introduce each exam. For now, you just have to know what am I looking for. Your answers will be graded according to accuracy, logic, and source. So when you give evidence from the text, is your evidence correct? When you explain that evidence, is your logic good? And can you tell me where in the text you found that evidence? There are a number of other rules, but the key one is you have to give at least 4 different discontinuous pieces of specific evidence. 4. So you can't just choose one thing to talk about. You have to talk about at least 4 different things. And then here's a good reminder. You can ask AI to help you, but AI often gives terrible answers, and you won't know why the answers are terrible, but I will. Also, like, if you want, you can ask AI to correct your grammar and spelling. I don't really care about that, but if you care, you can do that. If you do that, you must double check everything. I had a student in the past who asked AI to correct his exam answers, grammar, and spelling. He did not notice that AI changed all of his page numbers. And so he got a very low score. You must double check everything. Um, okay, this one is kind of interesting because we have a new Moodle system. The old Moodle system, after I give you a grade and I leave a comment explaining your grade, Moodle would not notify you. However, I was playing around with this new Moodle, and let me see if I can find it. There's something called lesson essay graded notification, or if you look at it in Chinese, 学习单元的问答题已经计分的通知. To me, this sounds like if you turn this on, Moodle will notify you when I give you a grade on your essay question. But I'm not sure. So we're going to find out during the midterm exam. Very exciting. Okay, so some of you, okay, so like make sure to go to notifications, settings, turn that on so that we can test whether Moodle actually will tell you when you get a grade. Okay, some of you may not have answered essay questions before. So here are some examples that you can consider. These are all examples of other texts and other questions. Nothing in these examples will give you knowledge or information that will help you. But the way that these answers are written could help you structure your own answer. And I also included a bad example to show you what not to do. And I'm going to talk about this before the midterm exam. If you do look at these examples, I suggest you focus on this one. The Merchant of Venice is a Shakespeare play. So this answer should be, it should look the closest to the kind of answer that I want you to give in this class. Here's a Chinese article on why you shouldn't copy from other people. And then we have the exams, the midterm exam, as promised, from 23rd October to 30th October from noon when the bell rings to just before midnight. And then the final exam, same thing. Okay, lastly, we have an extra credit. If you think you're going to fail, or if you just want more points, you can do the extra credit. If you do a good job, and your original grade was a failing grade, I will pass you. If your original grade was a passing grade, I will give you an additional between 3 to 7 points. So, you know, it sounds like a great deal, right? So it's not exactly easy. It will take time and effort. And there is a word count, at least 100 meaningful words in English or 2000 in Chinese or whatever language. But if I use Google Translate, it has to turn into 1000 English words. So there is a word count. You can only submit like Windows Microsoft Word documents. So some students will run into this problem. Can you see the picture? Can you tell what's wrong with this picture? How many words are highlighted? 2, right? But in the bottom left, it says 5. It's counting each letter as a word. So there is a word count requirement. If this happens to you, you're not going to get the extra credit. So from what I can understand, this happens sometimes when people write something in Google Docs and then save it as a Microsoft Word file. So don't do that. If you do use Google Docs, please copy and paste it into Microsoft Word. If you forget and this does happen to you, and you can tell because like these words are cut in half because it's counting each letter as a word. If this happens to you, the only solution I could find was copy the whole essay, open something that is not Google Docs and not Microsoft Word, paste it there, open a new Microsoft Word document, copy from the new place, paste it into the new Microsoft Word document, and that's how you solve the problem. It's very annoying, so please try to avoid it in the first place. Okay, that's it. Questions about Moodle? All right, so that is the course introduction. Now let's talk about, as one of my former TAs called him, old Billy Shakes. So Shakespeare was writing at the end of the 16th and beginning of the 17th centuries. He was mostly active As we will see later in this document from 1592-ish. This is our first reference to Shakespeare as a playwright. And he died in sometime after he died in 1616. So that's the time period that Shakespeare was active. Again, back in those days, we don't always have a clear historical record, so a lot of the details we're not exactly sure about. Sometimes, if you read about Shakespeare, you will encounter people who say, oh, Shakespeare didn't exist. He's actually a fake name for a group of famous writers who, for some reason, didn't want to use their own names. Or he's a fake name for a mysterious writer who, for political reasons, couldn't use their own name. Let me tell you right now, that is false. That is 100% wrong. And the only reason people still believe this is because they can't believe that one regular dude who is not from a noble family, who did not have a special, very good education, could write plays that Shakespeare wrote. It's past discrimination. But basically, all of the evidence that we have says that Shakespeare actually was this person. He did write these plays. So Shakespeare did receive an education. It was not a special education. It was a regular education for families that could afford to pay. And in those days, the education began with Latin and then ended with Greek. 从拉丁文到希腊文. No English. English was considered an everyday language that you did not have to spend time on in the classroom. So the textbook materials were usually works of classic literature and history. So you can see how that formed a foundation for Shakespeare's interest in stories and in storytelling, and also gave him ideas for what to write about. Shakespeare's plays are often divided into tragedies, comedies, histories, a long line of history plays, and then a final category that some people call fantasy. So you can see where he gets his ideas. And you can also see where he learned about language. At the time, Latin was still the language of knowledge and education and business. Under Latin was French, and then under French finally was English. So Shakespeare had all of these language resources that he could use to write plays with, so that they had the maximum expressive quality. He could make the language do what he wanted it to do. Now, quick question. Who was the most famous playwright of the 16th century? And the answer is Christopher Marlowe. Shakespeare only became famous near the end of his life. Marlowe, who was born about the same time as Shakespeare, was considered the genius playwright of the age. He was not the first person to write plays in English, but he took what others had tried to do and he made it so much better. So the thing about plays began as a kind of religious ceremony. Each year, Christmas, Easter, medieval villages would put on so-called mystery plays and morality plays to remind people about stories from the Bible, especially Jesus Christ, to remind people to be good and don't be evil. So as you can imagine, these plays were often very educational and not that fun. But around the beginning of the 16th century, people started thinking about using plays to tell different stories. And because the source of the the form of the play is like important literature, people only wrote in poetry or mostly wrote in poetry. Poetry was considered a higher form of language, and it was also easier for the actors to remember. So gradually, plays in English began to be written in a form called blank verse. Blank verse is unrhymed iambic pentameter. 不押韵五步一阳歌. I'm sure the Chinese doesn't help you. What this means is every line. Okay, let me begin from iambic. The word iambic means that you have a pair of sounds, unstressed and then stressed. 轻音加重音, dun 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 dun. Each line of poetry has 5 pairs. So each line is dun 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 dun. That's one line. And the different lines do not rhyme. 没有押韵. Right? So iambic just means unstressed and stressed. Pentameter, penta means 5. Each line has 5 pairs. And then there are unrhymed lines. Let me give you a quick example from the sonnets. The sonnets also use this format. So if you look at Sonnet 18, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Dun 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 dun. Especially if you close your eyes and you listen to the rhythm. So that is the main form of English poetry in Shakespeare's day. At first, early playwrights kind of struggled. This is not how they usually talked in daily life. English was a daily use language, was not a literary language. They had a bit of trouble like putting English into this form. But then came Marlowe, genius Marlowe. Not only did he make this poetry sound natural, he made it sound passionate, powerful, emotional. He wrote about characters with high ambition, who fell into love very deeply, who became rulers of nations, and sometimes people who wanted revenge very badly. His most famous line is from the play Dr. Faustus, which is one of the example essay question answers. He's describing Helen of Troy. Remember this woman? The most beautiful woman of Troy. She got seduced by Paris. That was the beginning of the Trojan War. How beautiful must Helen be to start a 20-year war? This is what Marlowe said. Is this the face that launched 1,000 ships and toppled the topless towers of Ilium? The face that launched 1,000 ships. From the single beautiful woman's face, connecting it with the entire 20 years war. So that's the achievement that Marlowe made. Of course, his plays today, we don't think they're as good as Shakespeare's because he can do the really great high stuff, but Shakespeare can also do the funny low stuff as well. Marlowe didn't really do that part as well. But people think that the main reason Marlowe wasn't able to develop his full powers is because he died before 30 in a pub fight under very mysterious circumstances. So previously, we only knew that he got stabbed to death. And you know, people get into fights all the time. But then it was discovered that the people in that bar knew him. They weren't just strangers. It was discovered that Marlowe was working for the Queen, Queen Elizabeth. He was probably spying on her political enemies for her, and that the people in the bar belonged to those groups. So it looks like Marlowe was assassinated before he was 30, poor guy. And that's why today Shakespeare has turned out to be a more famous playwright than Marlowe. So yes, Marlowe did the great things, but Shakespeare also he came up with the idea of what we call tragicomedy. In Marlowe, if you're writing a tragedy, everything is tragic. If you're writing a comedy, everything is funny. Although Marlowe didn't really do well at comedy. Shakespeare realized that if in the middle of tragedy you add some funny bits, it makes the tragedy even more powerful. It adds the effect, and it's also more true to real life. When something terrible happens in real life, often it is not 100% terrible. Often there will be parts of it that will be silly or absurd or surreal, or just plain stupid. And that is an aspect of life that Shakespeare captures very well. So in those days, um, playwrights and actors, these were not actual jobs. If the government came around and asked, "What do?" You can't say, "I'm an actor." Instead, if you were a good actor, someone in the royal court would hire you as an employee to do random jobs. Like it's a random title. So um, maybe your actual title would be like servant to the king or something. You wouldn't have to do anything. It's just a way to give you an official job. So Shakespeare's acting company was called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. The Lord Chamberlain is a government official. His original job was to clean the toilet, but in those days it had already developed into he was the king's like household manager. And so the Lord Chamberlain would pay uh, a stipend or patronage, would pay the actors and playwrights to help make sure that they don't die of starvation. And in turn, the plays were often dedicated to the Lord Chamberlain to thank him and to make sure history remembers that this person supported the arts. Um, so yeah, Shakespeare's family had enough money to give him an education. Near the end of his father's life, Shakespeare was able to buy him a noble title, which shows that he was a quite successful actor and playwright. His most famous playhouse is the Globe Theater, which was built in, I guess, 1590. Yeah, it says 1599, right? There is a Globe Theater today in London, but it's not in the exact same location. It does look almost exactly like what Shakespeare's looked like. They tried very hard to rebuild the exact same theater. Here, this is a good one. This is what the Globe Theater looks like today. Can I get like an... Okay, there we go. So the entrance is opposite the stage. You go in, and it's a globe, right? It's a circle. On all sides, there are 3 levels of audience seating, and also you can stand in the middle. So like these tourists are standing here. Um, the cheapest audience seats are actually standing seats in the middle. And then the higher the seats are, the more expensive they are. The stage, it's just a platform with 2 levels in the back. That you can sometimes use the 3rd level if you need like somebody high up or like a god or something. So you will see that these plays were not very, they didn't really care about realism. If you watch any video of a Shakespeare performance in the Globe Theater, it's just 2 or 3 people walking around the stage. Maybe somebody appears from the back on the 2nd floor. Um, so it's not like a movie. Most of it you have to imagine based on what the characters say and what they do. The same space will transform from a house to a street to a ship to an island, depending on what's going on. Plays in those days uh, were kind of like the basic entertainment. like a soap opera, right? 八点档. So they were often violent, bloody, sexual, just all kinds of entertaining. At the same time, they had to be written in poetry, or most of it had to be written in poetry. So the language was also very artistic and creative. It's a very rare combination where one kind of entertainment is both low and high for different groups of audience. The plays were often 3 hours long, sometimes longer. There were no breaks. Today, if you watch a 3 hour movie, they might give you a break in the middle. In those days, no breaks. And they were popular entertainment. So people often thought that, it's just something to do after dinner. They didn't really go watch a play twice or 3 times. So each acting company usually performed a play only once. They would put on performances throughout the week. And so each acting company had to remember 6 or 7 plays at the same time. How do they do that? Well, each actor only cares about his own performance, his own lines. So that's one reason why we don't have a complete copy of Shakespeare's version of the plays. Because when he was finished writing them, he would give these pages to this actor, those pages to that actor, and you would never see a full copy again. And that's also why it's written in poetry, because the actors have to remember so much. It's if they start forgetting, it's easier to figure out what should be said here based on the poetry, based on what's happening in the play. If a play was popular, they might perform it twice. If a play was very popular, they would perform it 3 times. And if a play was incredibly popular, the queen might ask you to perform it in court. Those are a completely different kind of performance. And then finally, you will notice this is an outdoor theater. So what do you do if the story takes place at night? You have to light some torches and pretend that it's night. But later in Shakespeare's career, he moved to an indoor theater um, where they had more control over lighting, and so they could use more special effects. You can have ghosts, you can have lightning, you can do more things indoors as well. And we're going to see some of that in Macbeth, one of his later plays, which is a lot of the time about ghosts and witches and like fate and curse, things like that. Right. So Queen Elizabeth dies in 1603, which is kind of a small problem for Shakespeare because Queen Elizabeth loved the plays. James I did not really. Queen Elizabeth was a staunch Protestant, 新教徒. James I was more of a Catholic, 天主教. So major political changes. Shakespeare also had to adapt to the times. His plays became less about current events and more about historical events. James I had an interest in demons and ghosts, so Shakespeare's plays also started to have more supernatural elements, ghosts and fairies and things like that. In the early 17th century, England started expanding overseas. We had the first colony in North America. And so some of Shakespeare's later plays also feature characters who have gone to North America or have been to North America, or there's something related to overseas trade, things like that. In Shakespeare's early career, this is how playwrights learned to write plays. They would work with older playwrights on the same play, and the older one would lead the younger one, kind of like an apprentice, 学徒制. Near the end of his career, Shakespeare, I guess he was getting tired. He started working more and more with other playwrights. So for some of his early and late plays, very early and very late, textual analysis has discovered which parts were written by Shakespeare and which parts were not. And so The Two Noble Kinsmen is the last play that we think Shakespeare helped to write. Dies in 1616. His friends publish the first edition of his so-called complete plays, which are not complete, in 1623. And the rest is a story of editors. So that's the basic idea here. Okay, good. If you're interested, you can read more online. Our textbook also has an introduction, but I did not give it to you even in the PDF because it's 50 pages, and I don't think you're going to read 50 pages. But for you, I read those 50 pages and I summarized them here. Okay, so the first unit next week will be the sonnets. We talked about the form of the lines. A sonnet is a kind of poem that originated in Renaissance Italy, 意大利文艺复兴时期. The most famous sonneteer was Petrarch, Petolaka. If you remember from high school world history, he appeared in the Renaissance section. So a sonnet is defined as 14 lines. So in Chinese, we call them 桑赖诗 or 14行诗. And traditionally, they are about love. In Petrarch's days, the 14 lines would be divided into 8 lines and 6 lines. The first 8 lines would be 4 and 4, and the last 6 lines would be 3 and 3. So each stanza, 4 lines, would be about one thing. The next 4 lines would be about something similar. And then there would be a turn or a transition, and the final 3 and 3 would be about something related, but also different. It's like a twist. In Shakespeare's time, he reinvented the sonnet. So Shakespeare's sonnets we now call the Shakespearean sonnet. They are 4-4-4-2. So each stanza is now 4 lines. We look at 4 lines together, and the sonnets do rhyme. I think I said they don't rhyme. The sonnets rhyme. The plays don't rhyme, but the sonnets rhyme. So if you look at this, the rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. So A, B, A, B, right? Day, 8, May, date, A, B, A, B. And then shines, dimmed, declines, untrimmed, C, D, C, D. Fade, ost, shade, grossed, E, F, E, F. And then C and D is G, G. So he still follows Petrarch's idea, where the first 8 lines talk about one thing. Lines 9 to 12, there's a kind of twist, and then 13 and 14 are a kind of conclusion. Roughly. And he wrote like something like, I can't remember how many, but we're not reading all of the sonnets. Over 100, almost 200 sonnets, maybe more than 200. The sonnets were discovered after his death. They were put in the current order by a random anonymous editor. We don't know what order Shakespeare would have wanted. The sonnets they look related to each other. There seems to be the same speaker or main character who seems to be going through different events in their life. There might be a love interest. The speaker might be talking to what one of the sonnets calls my dark lady. The lady might actually be a man. We're not sure. The fact is, we discovered these sonnets. We know Shakespeare wrote them, and that's all we know. Everything else is just guessing. But even if we look at these sonnets individually, each one of them offers a powerful glimpse into a moment in one's life of high passion, or sometimes the moment after high passion, some important event, some important thoughts. So as I said, the sonnet is originally about love, But Shakespeare expanded this format. Some of them are about love, as in the first one we're going to read, Sonnet 18. Some of them are about friendship. Some of them are about regret. Some of them are about sex. So it's no longer just love poetry. Shakespeare really opened up possibilities for people in the future to use the sonnet form to write about many different subjects. So before next week, please read the first 5 sonnets. That would be 18, 30, 35, 60, and 73. Yeah, so like that first page. And then before the following week, we're going to read the last, wait, 2, 4, 6, 8. Oh, okay, yeah. So the first page has 6. You don't have to read 73. The syllabus tells you, right? It says 18, 30, 35, 60, and 62. That's before next week. Um, let's read 18 together, just so you know kind of what it feels like to read this sonnet. So for the textbook, what it does is it has footnotes on the bottom that explain some of the harder uses of language. And the footnote numbers correspond to the line numbers. So 18.4, this is sonnet 18, line 4, the word lease. It explains the word lease. So if you look on the right, these line numbers only appear if there is a footnote. So sometimes the footnote will just give you the modern word. Sometimes it will explain the meaning. Sometimes it will give you a paraphrase. So for example, this footnote, which explains line 12 here, to time thou growst. It says to ... growst. And it gives you a paraphrase of what Shakespeare is trying to say. So those are the 3 kinds of footnotes you will get. And if you look at the footnotes and you still don't understand, that's when you go to a dictionary. Okay, let's take a look. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Which in modern English is, should I compare you to a summer's day? Thee is you. Shall is should or will. Thou, also you, thou art more lovely and more temperate. Art is are. So it's saying you are more lovely and milder. Temperate here just means not so hot in this case. So this poem is subverting the usual ideas of how to describe a beautiful woman. Often a poem will say, oh, you're just like the summer, you're just like all of the other things Shakespeare is going to mention. And Shakespeare here is saying, no, I'm not going to compare you to those things because you are better than those things. Right? So should I compare you to a summer? No, you're much better than a summer's day. And then the next few lines explain why. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. A bud is a flower that is just beginning to bloom. Line 4, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Hath is has. Lease, in modern English, is a rental agreement. When you rent a place, you sign a lease with the landlord. But here, according to the footnote, it just means the time of the thing. So the time of a summer's day. So this line is saying, summer passes too quickly. Line 5, sometime too hot, the eye of heaven shines. So summer is, the eye of heaven is the sun. So sometimes the sun is too hot, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. Complexion means the color of one's skin. Here he's saying sometimes the sun is covered, by a cloud. And every fair from fair sometimes declines. Fair here means beautiful. In modern English, the word fair can also mean blonde, 金发. So here this line is saying even beauty will decline, will, grow less beautiful. Line 8, by chance or nature's changing course, untrimmed. So untrimmed, the footnote tells you, taking away decoration, taking away beauty. So these two lines mean that even something beautiful will, because of chance or because of nature, slowly grow less beautiful. So here the speaker is talking about a summer's day. These are all the reasons why a summer's day is not actually that good a comparison. Line 9, the turn. Here's the twist. But thy eternal summer shall not fade. If I do compare you to summer, you, thy, which means yours, your summer is eternal. Your summer will never fade. Line 10, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Owest is to own, is to have. So if I do compare you to a summer, the beauty that you have will never go away, will never be lost. Line 11, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. Death will never be able to say that you belong to his territory. Wanderest, you'll see the two apostrophes. The apostrophe skips letters, usually to make the line fit the format of the poem. Wanderest, the full term is wanderest, which in modern English is wanders. EST ending today is just an S ending. Yeah, also in line 10, right? Ost, in those days was O-W-E. Today it means own, O-W-N, which means to have. And then line 12, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. Why will you not suffer this kind of ending? Because I will write you into the lines of my poetry. Grossed, the footnotes explains it's kind of like grafting one part of the plant onto another part. 就种植物的嫁接. So the writer, the speaker is grafting this beautiful woman into his poetry. And he's saying that his poetry is eternal. So we have the conclusion. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this poem, and this gives life to thee. So the poem, at first it's saying, you're too beautiful to compare to a summer's day. Summer isn't actually that great anyway. You're much better. And then finally it says, and the reason people will remember how beautiful you are is because I'm going to write this poem about you, and my poetry will live forever. So is it a love poem? That's something that I'll leave you to think about before next week. Please finish the next 4 poems as well.